At my grandson's graduation, he placed my table by the exit with a note that said, "Don't stay long. You embarrass me." I stayed quiet. On Monday, he cried at my feet when I froze his college fund. But let me start from the beginning because that moment didn't happen in isolation. It was the culmination of something I'd been too blind to see building for months. I remember sitting in my car outside the university auditorium that Saturday morning, my hands gripping the steering wheel, as I stared at the imposing brick building. 23 years. That's how long it had been since I first held Kevin in my arms when he was just 8 years old, scared and broken after losing his parents in that terrible accident. 23 years of scraped knees I bandaged, homework I helped with, teenage rebellions I navigated with patience I didn't know I possessed. The parking lot was filled with families dressed in their finest clothes, carrying bouquets and balloons. I smoothed down my navy dress, the same one I'd worn to Kevin's high school graduation 4 years ago. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. It wasn't new, but it was clean and pressed. I'd even gotten my hair done at the salon yesterday, spending money I probably shouldn't have, but this was Kevin's day. My boy was graduating with honors from one of the state's best engineering programs. As I walked toward the entrance, I could see other grandparents being embraced by their grandchildren, taking photos, sharing proud moments. My chest swelled with anticipation. Kevin had been so busy with finals and job interviews that we'd barely spoken in weeks. But I understood. He was building his future, the future I'd helped make possible by working double shifts at the school cafeteria well into my 60s, by taking out loans against my small teacher's pension, by saying no to things I wanted so I could say yes to what he needed. Inside the auditorium, I approached the check-in table where a young volunteer with a bright smile looked up at me. "Name, please? Dorothy Brennan. I'm here for Kevin Mitchell's graduation." She flipped through a stack of cards, her finger trailing down a list. "Ah, yes, here you are." She handed me a small card with my name and table assignment. "You're at table 47, near the back." I looked at the card, confused. Table 47? I'd assumed I'd be sitting with Kevin's brother David and his wife Samantha, maybe at one of the family tables near the front. "Are you sure? I'm his grandmother who raised him." The volunteer's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this is what I have on the list. Table 47 is just past the refreshment station." I made my way through the crowd, weaving between round tables decorated with the university's colors. Table 15, 20, 25. The numbers kept climbing as I walked further from the stage. Finally, I reached table 47. It was tucked into a corner near the exit doors, partially hidden behind a large pillar. Only 2 other seats were occupied, an elderly couple who looked as confused as I felt. That's when I saw it. Tucked halfway, under my place setting, was a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Grandma Dorothy. Don't stay long. You embarrass me. Just leave after the ceremony. Thanks." The words hit me like a physical blow. I read them again, hoping I'd misunderstood, but the message was clear. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The chattering voices around me faded into white noise. Embarrass him? I looked down at my dress, suddenly seeing it through different eyes. Was it too old-fashioned? Too cheap? I touched my hair, wondering if the salon had made me look foolish instead of festive. But it wasn't really about my appearance, was it? It was about me. Somehow I had become something Kevin was ashamed of. I slipped the note into my purse and tried to focus on the ceremony. When Kevin's name was called, I stood and clapped, my hands shaking. He looked so handsome in his cap and gown, so accomplished. For a moment, I forgot about the note and felt nothing but pure pride. This was my boy, the child I'd raised who was now becoming a man. But when I tried to catch his eye, he looked right through me. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn for photos and celebrations. I approached Kevin's group slowly, staying on the periphery. David and Samantha were there with their 2 young children, along with several of Kevin's friends. Everyone was laughing and taking pictures. "Kevin," I called softly, stepping forward. He turned, and for just a second, I saw something flash across his face. Guilt? Annoyance? It was gone so quickly I couldn't be sure. "Oh, hi, Grandma." His voice was flat, distant. "Thanks for coming." That was it. No hug, no proud introduction to his friends, no acknowledgement of everything we'd been through together. Samantha stepped closer to Kevin, linking her arm through his in a gesture that seemed both protective and possessive. "Dorothy, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How nice that you could make it. Such a lovely ceremony. I wanted to say something, to remind them that I'd been at every school play, every science fair, every parent-teacher conference when Kevin was growing up. Instead, I just nodded. Well, I said quietly, I should probably get going. It's a long drive home. Kevin nodded quickly. Yeah, okay. Drive safe. I walked back to my car alone, the congratulations and laughter of other families echoing around me. In my purse, the note seemed to burn against my fingers. As I sat in the driver's seat, I finally let the tears come. How had I gotten here? How had the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms become someone who was embarrassed by my very existence? The drive home felt endless. I kept replaying moments from Kevin's childhood, searching for signs I'd missed. Had I been too lenient? Too strict? Had I failed him somehow? By the time I pulled into my driveway, my eyes were red and swollen from crying. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of the bedroom Kevin used to sleep in when he had nightmares. The walls were still covered with his childhood artwork and school awards. Photographs of just the two of us at various stages of his life smiled down at me from the dresser. I thought about the college fund I'd started for him the month after his parents died. Every spare penny had gone into that account. I'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner more times than I could count, worn shoes until they had holes in the soles, declined invitations because I couldn't afford to go. All so Kevin could have opportunities, so he could build a life without the financial struggles I'd known. The note was still in my purse downstairs, but I didn't need to read it again. The words were burned into my memory. Don't stay long. You embarrass me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just an old woman clinging to a past that no longer existed. Maybe it was time to accept that the sweet little boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by a man who saw me as nothing more than an embarrassment. But as I finally drifted off to sleep in the early hours of the morning, something else was taking root in my chest alongside the hurt. It was small at first, barely noticeable. It was the first whisper of what would soon become a very different kind of lesson. The next few days passed in a blur of restless sleep and forced normalcy. I went through the motions of my usual routine, watering my small garden, watching the morning news, organizing photo albums I'd looked through 100 times before. But the note kept surfacing in my thoughts like a splinter I couldn't remove. Wednesday afternoon, I was folding laundry when my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and my heart lifted slightly. Maybe he was calling to explain what had happened at the graduation, or to apologize for Kevin's behavior. Hi, David. Hey, Dorothy. His voice sounded strained, almost uncomfortable. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. I settled into my kitchen chair, cradling the phone against my ear. Of course, honey, what's on your mind? There was a pause, then he cleared his throat. Samantha and I have been talking, and we think it might be good for you to, well, to give Kevin some space for a while. The words hit me like cold water. Space? What do you mean? He's starting his career now, meeting new people, building professional relationships. Sometimes it's hard when family dynamics are complicated. Complicated? I repeated, my voice smaller than I intended. David, I don't understand. What's complicated about loving my grandson? Another pause. I could hear Samantha's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. It's not about love, Dorothy. It's about what's best for Kevin right now. He needs to establish himself independently. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Did Kevin ask you to call me? Well, not exactly, but did Samantha? The silence stretched long enough to give me my answer. Dorothy, this isn't about taking sides. We just think some distance might be healthy for everyone. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the photographs on my refrigerator. Kevin at age 8, gap-toothed and grinning after losing his first tooth in my care. Kevin at 12, proudly holding up a spelling bee trophy. Kevin at 16, rolling his eyes at the camera, but unable to hide his smile after I'd made his favorite birthday cake. When had those smiles become fake? When had my presence in his life shifted from welcome to burdensome? Thursday evening, I decided to drive to the grocery store in the next town over. I needed milk and bread, but more than that, I needed to get out of the house before the walls closed in completely. As I was loading my bags into the car, I heard a familiar laugh from across the parking lot. Kevin was there with a group of people I didn't recognize, all young professionals by the look of them. They were standing around an expensive-looking car, talking and laughing. He looked so confident, so at ease. So different from the awkward, grieving child I'd taken in all those years ago. I started to raise my hand to wave, then stopped. The note's words echoed in my mind. You embarrass me. Instead, I watched from behind my car as Kevin gestured animatedly, telling some story that had his friends laughing. He looked happy, successful, everything I'd hoped he would become. But I also noticed something else. The way he held himself, the careful way he spoke. It reminded me of someone. It took me a moment to place it, but then it hit me. He was acting like Samantha. The same practiced charm, the same calculated social grace. I drove home wondering when Kevin had learned to perform instead of just being himself. Friday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was tending to my tomato plants when I heard car. Doors slam in my driveway. Through the fence, I could see Samantha walking toward my front door, her heels clicking purposefully on the concrete. I wiped my hands on my gardening gloves and met her at the door. Dorothy, she said with that familiar smile that never quite reached her eyes. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I was in the neighborhood. Samantha had never been in the neighborhood before. My house was 15 minutes from theirs, down a winding country road that led nowhere else. Of course not. Come in. I stepped aside, suddenly conscious of my dirt-stained clothes and unpainted nails. She perched on the edge of my couch, looking around my living room with barely concealed judgment. Her gaze lingered on the outdated furniture, the faded curtains, the collection of Kevin's school photos that covered nearly every surface. I wanted to talk to you about Kevin, she began, her voice gentle but firm. David told me about your conversation yesterday. I nodded, unsure where this was heading. Dorothy, I hope you understand that we all want what's best for Kevin. He's at such a crucial point in his life right now. She paused, studying my face. Sometimes the people we love most can inadvertently hold us back. I would never hold Kevin back, I said quietly. I know you wouldn't mean to. Her smile widened, but her eyes remained cold. But think about it from his perspective. He's trying to build professional relationships, maybe find a serious girlfriend, start a real adult life. When people see. She gestured vaguely around my modest living room. When they see what, Samantha? Well, they make assumptions. About backgrounds. About family situations. Kevin works so hard to present himself professionally, and sometimes family history can complicate that. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire I was just beginning to see. Are you saying I'm an embarrassment to Kevin? Samantha's laugh was like breaking glass. Oh, Dorothy, don't be so dramatic. I'm just saying that sometimes love means knowing when to step back. She stood to leave, smoothing down her designer skirt. At the door, she turned back with an afterthought that felt anything but casual. You know, Dorothy, you've done such a wonderful job raising Kevin. Really, you should be proud. But maybe it's time to let him stand on his own 2 feet. After all, you wouldn't want him to become too dependent on family support, would you? After she left, I stood in my empty living room, finally understanding what I'd been too naive to see before. This wasn't about Kevin outgrowing me. This was about Samantha systematically cutting me out of his life. And somehow she'd convinced him that it was his own idea. Chapter 3. The Web of Lies. That weekend, I couldn't shake Samantha's words. Her visit felt like a warning wrapped in fake concern, and I found myself replaying every interaction I'd had with Kevin over the past year, looking for signs of her influence. Saturday afternoon, while cleaning out old paperwork, I found Kevin's thank you note from last Christmas. His handwriting, usually so careful, looked rushed. Thanks for the sweater and the check, Grandma. Really appreciate it. Hope your holidays are good. Kevin I compared it to a card he'd written me 3 years ago. Grandma Dorothy, thank you so much for the amazing Christmas. The sweater is perfect and I love the color you picked. I can't wait to wear it to school and tell everyone my grandma made the best cookies in the world. I hope we can bake together again soon. I love you so much. You're Kevin. The difference was startling. Somewhere between those 2 cards, my grandson had learned to write like a stranger. Sunday evening, I decided to call Kevin directly. Maybe if we talked without David or Samantha around, I could understand what had gone wrong. He answered on the 4th ring. Oh, hi, Grandma. Hi, sweetheart. I haven't heard from you since graduation. How are you settling in with your new job? It's fine. Pretty busy, you know. The conversation felt stilted, like we were reading from a script neither of us liked. Kevin, about graduation day. I started carefully. I found a note at my table. Silence. I just want to understand. Have I done something wrong? Said something that upset you? Grandma, it's not. Look, I'm just trying to focus on my career, right? Now, maybe we could talk later? When later? Kevin, we used to talk every week. Now I feel like I'm bothering you just by calling. I heard him sigh. Things are different now. I'm not a kid anymore. I know you're not a kid, but you're still my grandson. That doesn't change. Grandma, I really have to go. I'll call you soon, okay? He hung up before I could respond. Monday morning, I drove to the bank to check on Kevin's college fund. I'd been contributing to it faithfully for 15 years. And with his graduation, I wanted to make sure the transfer for his graduate school was processed correctly. Mrs. Patterson, the bank manager I'd worked with for years, greeted me with her usual warm smile. Dorothy, how was Kevin's graduation? You must be so proud. It was wonderful, I managed. I wanted to check on the fund transfer for his graduate program. She pulled up the account on her computer, then frowned slightly. Dorothy, I don't show any transfer request for this account. Are you sure Kevin submitted the paperwork? My heart sank. He's supposed to start his MBA program in the fall. The deadline for deposits was last week. Mrs. Patterson looked confused. Well, the money is still here, earning interest. Maybe he decided to defer enrollment? I thanked her and left the bank feeling more unsettled than before. Kevin had been talking about graduate school for 2 years. Why would he suddenly change his mind without telling me? That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to David and Samantha's neighborhood and parked across from their house. I wasn't planning to go in. I just needed to think, and somehow being near family, even at a distance, felt comforting. I'd been sitting there for maybe 20 minutes when Kevin's car pulled into their driveway. I watched as he got out, then froze when I saw Samantha emerge from the house to greet him. She was holding what looked like real estate brochures. They stood on the front porch talking, and even from across the street, I could see Kevin nodding enthusiastically. Samantha pointed to something in one of the brochures, and Kevin laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd seen from him in months. Then I saw David join them, carrying what looked like financial documents. The three of them huddled together, passing papers back and forth, pointing and discussing something that clearly excited them all. I started my car and drove home, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd witnessed. Kevin wasn't planning for graduate school. He was planning something else entirely, something that involved David and Samantha, but apparently not me. That evening, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who worked as a real estate agent. Dorothy, how lovely to hear from you. How's Kevin doing? That's actually why I'm calling. I think he might be looking at buying a house, but he hasn't mentioned it to me. I was wondering, well, this might sound silly, but could you look up recent real estate activity for Kevin Mitchell? I just want to make sure he's not making any big decisions without proper guidance. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment. Dorothy, I probably shouldn't share client information, but since you're family, Kevin did contact me about 3 weeks ago. He's looking at some pretty expensive properties. When I asked about financing, he mentioned having access to a substantial family fund. My mouth went dry. A family fund? He said his grandmother had set aside money for his education, but that he wanted to use it for a house down payment instead. He seemed to think it was already approved. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. Kevin wasn't just pulling away from me. He was planning to use my life savings for something he'd never even discussed with me. 15 years of sacrifice, of putting every extra penny into his future, and he saw it as just money that was already his to spend however he pleased. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the realization that Samantha had been right. About one thing, Kevin was standing on his own 2 feet. But the foundation he was standing on was built from my years of going without, and he was about to kick it out from under both of us. I pulled out my address book and found the number for my attorney. It was time Kevin learned that some lessons can't be taught with words. Tuesday morning, I met with my attorney, Robert Hayes, a kind man who'd helped me set up Kevin's college fund years ago. Dorothy, I need to ask you directly, he said, reviewing the fund documents. Are you certain you want to make these changes? Changes? Once I file these papers, Kevin won't be able to access the account without your written permission. I thought about the real estate brochures, about Samantha's calculating smile, about Kevin's dismissive tone when I'd called. I'm certain. I want control of the fund transferred back to me immediately. Any specific reason for the change? I handed him a copy of the graduation note I'd kept. Robert read it twice, his expression growing somber. I see. Dorothy, I have to ask, is Kevin aware you're making this change? No, and I don't want him to know until he tries to access the money. Robert nodded slowly. It's your money, Dorothy. You've been the sole contributor for 15 years. I'll have the paperwork filed by end of business today. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. When I played the message later, his voice was tight with frustration. Dorothy, we need to talk. Kevin's having some issues with his bank, and Samantha thinks you might know something about it. Call me back. I didn't call back. Thursday evening, Samantha showed up at my door again. This time, she didn't bother with pleasantries. Dorothy, what did you do? I opened the door wider, inviting her in. What do you mean? Kevin can't access his college fund. The bank says there's been some kind of change to the account. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. I sat down in my favorite chair, the one Kevin used to curl up in when he was small. The account is fine. I just took back control of my own money. Samantha's face flushed red. Your money? Dorothy, that fund was for Kevin's education. You can't just take it away because your feelings got hurt. Actually, I can. I'm the only one who ever contributed to it. And it's still in my name. This is ridiculous. Samantha stood up, pacing my small living room. Kevin is trying to build a life. He has plans, responsibilities. You can't just pull the rug out from under him because he's growing up. What plans? I asked calmly. Graduate school? Because according to the bank, he never applied for any transfers for tuition. Samantha stopped pacing. For a moment, her carefully constructed composure slipped. Kevin's an adult. He can decide how to use his educational fund. To buy a house? The silence stretched between us. Finally, Samantha sat back down, her expression shifting to something that almost looked like sincerity. Dorothy, you raised a wonderful young man. Kevin is smart, ambitious, and responsible. But you have to let him make his own choices, even if they're not the choices you would make. You're right, I said quietly. He is wonderful, and smart, and responsible, which is why I don't understand how he could write me a note telling me I embarrass him. Samantha's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Kids say things they don't mean when they're stressed. He's not a kid anymore. You just said so yourself. Dorothy, look around. Samantha gestured at my modest living room, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I was beginning to recognize. Kevin works with people who drive luxury cars, who wear expensive suits, who vacation in Europe. Can you honestly say you don't see how that might be challenging for him? So I should just disappear so he doesn't have to be embarrassed by his poor grandmother? I'm not saying disappear. I'm saying maybe it's time to consider what's best for everyone. Samantha leaned forward, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Dorothy, you've done your job. You raised him when no one else could. But now he needs to establish himself independently. Sometimes love means knowing when to step back. And sometimes, I said standing up, love means teaching difficult lessons about gratitude and respect. Samantha's mask finally slipped completely. You selfish old woman, you're going to ruin his future because your pride got hurt? I think you should leave now. She stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. Fine, but don't expect Kevin to come crawling back to you after this. You've shown him exactly who you really are. After she left, I walked through my house, looking at all the photographs of Kevin growing up. In every single one, he was smiling. Really smiling, not the practiced expression I'd seen at graduation. Friday morning, David called again. Dorothy, please. Kevin is beside himself. He had a deposit due on a house, and now the whole deal is falling through. Then maybe he should have discussed his plans with the person who was financing them. You're being unreasonable. That money was meant for Kevin's future. It was meant for Kevin's education, not for Kevin's house. Education, housing. It's all part of building a life. Don't you want him to be happy? I thought about that question for a long time after hanging up. Did I want Kevin to be happy? Of course I did. But I also wanted him to be a good person, and good people don't treat their grandmothers like embarrassments to be hidden away. Saturday evening, as I was reading in my living room, I heard a car door slam outside. Through my front window, I could see Kevin walking up my driveway, his shoulders set in determination. I opened the door before he could knock. Hello, Kevin. He looked terrible. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Or tears, I couldn't tell which. Grandma Dorothy, he said, his voice cracking slightly. We need to talk. I stepped aside to let him in, and for the first time in months, my grandson was standing in my living room, but everything about the moment felt wrong. He wasn't here. Because he missed me, or because he wanted to repair our relationship. He was here because he needed something, and that realization hurt more than the graduation note ever could. Kevin stood in my living room, looking around at the photographs of his childhood as if seeing them for the first time in years. His hands were shaking slightly, and when he finally looked at me, I saw something I hadn't seen since he was 8. Years old and afraid of thunderstorms, he was scared. "Grandma," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're angry with me." I gestured toward the couch. "Sit down, Kevin." He perched on the edge of the cushion, the same spot where Samantha had sat just days before, but his posture was completely different. Where she had been calculating and controlled, Kevin looked broken. "The bank says you changed the college fund," he said, not meeting my eyes. "That's right." "Why?" The word came out like a sob. I sat down across from him, studying the young man I'd raised. "Because I found out you were planning to use it to buy a house." Kevin's face crumpled. "I was going to tell you." "When? After you'd already spent it?" "It's not like that. I thought." He ran his hands through his hair, leaving it even more disheveled. "The housing market is crazy right now, and if I don't buy soon, I'll be priced out forever. I thought I could use the fund as a down payment and then pay it back later." "Pay it back with what money?" "My salary, investments, I don't know. I figured I'd work it out." I leaned back in my chair, feeling older than my 70 years. "Kevin, do you have any idea how much money is in that account?" He shook his head. $87,000. I've been putting money into that fund for 15 years. Every birthday gift you didn't get, every vacation I didn't take, every repair I put off on this house, all of it went into your future." Kevin's eyes widened. "I didn't know it was that much." "You didn't know, because you never asked. You just assumed it was yours to spend however you wanted." Tears started rolling down his cheeks. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but I can't lose this house. Samantha found it for me, and it's perfect. It's in a great neighborhood, and it's exactly what I need to establish myself professionally." There it was. Samantha's influence. Even now. "What about graduate school? You've been talking about getting your MBA for 2 years. Kevin wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "I can do that later. Right now, I need to focus on my career and building equity." "That's not what you told me last Christmas. You said graduate school was essential for the kind of engineering work you wanted to do." "Plans change, Grandma. People change." I stood up and walked to my bookshelf, pulling out a photo album. I flipped through the pages until I found what I was looking for, a picture of Kevin at 15, proudly holding up his acceptance letter to a summer engineering camp. "Do you remember this?" I asked, showing him the photo. He nodded, fresh tears starting. "You were so excited. You told me that someday you were going to design buildings that could withstand earthquakes, that you were going to save lives with your work." I closed the album gently. "When did that dream become less important than impressing people with your address?" Kevin's shoulders started shaking. "It's not about impressing people. It's about fitting in. You don't understand what it's like, Grandma. Everyone I work with, they all come from money. They went to private schools. They have trust. Funds. Their parents are doctors and lawyers. I'm the only one whose grandmother works in a school cafeteria." The words hit me like a slap. "Worked. I retired 3 years ago." "You know what I mean." I sat back down, looking at this young man who had somehow learned to be ashamed of the very sacrifices that had made his success possible. "Kevin, do you remember what you told me when you were 10 years old, after that boy at school made fun of your hand-me-down backpack?" He shook his head. "You said, 'Grandma Dorothy, I don't care if my backpack is old as long as you're not sad about money.' You hugged me and promised that someday when you were grown up, you'd take care of me the way I took care of you." Kevin broke down completely then, sobbing like the scared 8-year-old I'd first met. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry. I know I've been awful," Samantha said. She said, what did Samantha say? She said that if I really wanted to succeed, I needed to create some distance from my past. She said successful people don't drag their family history into their professional lives. I felt a cold fury rise in my chest. "And what did you think about that advice?" I thought she was probably right. She knows about these things. She grew up wealthy. She understands how that world works. So you decided I was something to be ashamed of. Kevin looked up at me with swollen eyes. Not ashamed. Just, I thought maybe it would be easier if I kept my work life and my family life separate. By writing me a note telling me I embarrass you, he winced. I was panicking. I saw some of my colleagues at the graduation, and I knew they'd want to meet my family, and I panicked. I'm sorry, Grandma. I know it was cruel. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Kevin used to help me tend. You know what hurts the most, Kevin? It's not that you're ashamed of me. It's that you've forgotten who you are. I haven't forgotten. I turned back to face him. The Kevin I raised would never have let someone convince him that love and loyalty were things to be discarded for social advancement. The Kevin I raised understood that character matters more than appearances. I still understand that. Do you? Because the Kevin I raised would have been proud to introduce me to his colleagues, he would have said, "This is my grandmother, Dorothy. She's the strongest person I know, and everything I've accomplished is because she believed in me." Kevin buried his face in his hands. You're right. God, you're so right. I don't know what happened to me. I know what happened. You let someone poison your mind against the people who love you. He looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes. Can you forgive me? Can we fix this? I sat back down, feeling the weight of every year I'd lived. Kevin, forgiveness isn't the issue. The issue is whether you've learned anything from this. I have. I swear I have. Then tell me what you've learned. He was quiet for a long moment. I've learned that I hurt the person who loves me most in the world because I was worried about what strangers might think of me. And that the life Samantha wants me to build isn't worth having if it means losing you. I studied his face, looking for signs of the boy I'd raised. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. I already lost the house. The deposit was non-refundable, and without the fund money, I can't qualify for the mortgage. He looked around my living room again. Maybe I should just move back here with you. Start over. No, Kevin. You can't move backward, but you can choose to move forward differently. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. What do you mean? I walked to my desk and pulled out a piece of paper I'd prepared earlier that week. This is an application for the graduate program you wanted. The deadline was extended to next month. Kevin stared at the paper. But the money is still available for its intended purpose, your education. You'd still pay for graduate school? After everything I've done, I looked at my grandson, really looked at him, and saw glimpses of the boy who used to bake cookies with me on Sunday afternoons. Kevin, I would do anything for you, but only if you're doing it for the right reasons. He reached for the application with shaking hands. What about the house? What about establishing myself professionally? You'll establish yourself by becoming the best engineer you can be, and you'll buy a house when you can afford it with your own money, not with your grandmother's life savings. Kevin nodded slowly. What about Samantha? She's going to be furious. For the first time in days, I smiled. Let me worry about Samantha. 6 months later, I stood in the auditorium of the community college where I'd spent 30 years teaching before Kevin came into my life. The same stage where I'd watched countless students graduate was now hosting a different kind of ceremony. The Dorothy Brennan Scholarship Fund, announced the dean, will provide full educational support for children who have lost their parents and are being raised by grandparents or other family members. I watched from the front row as 5 young people, ranging in age from 8 to 17, walked across the stage to receive their awards. Each one had a story similar to Kevin's: loss, resilience, and a family member who'd stepped up when the world fell apart. Kevin sat beside me, wearing the simple suit he'd bought with his own money from his part-time job. He was thinner than he'd been at graduation, his face showing the stress of balancing graduate school with work, but his eyes were bright with purpose again. "Grandma," he whispered as we watched a 10-year-old girl accept her award. "This is incredible. How many kids will this help?" "As many as we can," I whispered back. "The fund started with half of what was in your college account. The other half is still paying for your MBA. He squeezed my hand. "I still can't believe you did this." After the ceremony, we drove to the small cafe where Kevin now worked weekends to help pay his expenses. It wasn't glamorous. He waited tables and washed dishes, but he told me it was the first job he'd ever had where he felt proud of earning his own way. "Mrs. Rodriguez says I can pick up extra shifts during winter break," he said as we shared a piece of apple pie. "If I save enough, I might be able to take that summer internship with the earthquake research team." I smiled, remembering the 15-year-old boy who'd dreamed of designing earthquake-resistant buildings. "That sounds wonderful. It doesn't pay much, but the experience would be incredible." He paused, looking embarrassed. "I know it's nothing like the job Samantha thought I should take." I hadn't seen Samantha since our last confrontation, but Kevin had told me about their final conversation. When he'd chosen graduate school over the house, when he'd started working at the cafe, when he'd moved into a small apartment he could actually afford, she'd made her feelings clear. "Some people," she told him, "are meant for bigger things, and some people are meant to stay small." Kevin had realized then that she'd never seen him as a person worth loving, only as a project worth improving. "Kevin," I said gently, "do you miss her guidance?" He considered this seriously. "I miss feeling like I had it all figured out. When I was following her plan, everything seemed so clear and simple. But I don't miss feeling like I had to hide who I really am." "And who are you really?" "I'm the grandson of a retired teacher who worked 3 jobs to put food on the table. And love in my life. I'm someone who believes that building something meaningful matters more than building something impressive." He grinned, and for a moment he looked exactly like the boy who used to help me plant tomatoes. "I'm someone who's proud to introduce you to anyone, anywhere, anytime." 2 weeks later, Kevin brought his study group to my house. 5 graduate students crowded around my kitchen table, working on a project about sustainable housing for disaster relief. I made sandwiches and listened to them debate engineering principles with the kind of passion I remembered from my teaching. Days. "Kevin talks about you all the time," said Maria, a young woman working on her thesis about earthquake-resistant design. "He says you taught him that the most important engineering principle is building things that last." "That's right," said another student, Jake. "He says you can make anything stronger if you build it with love instead of just ambition." After they left, Kevin helped me clean up the kitchen. "They think a lot of you," I said. "They're good people, real people. Not like—" He trailed off. "Not like Samantha's crowd?" "Yeah, these people care about making a difference, not just making money." I dried the last plate and set it in the cabinet. "You know, Kevin, I need to tell you something. When I created that scholarship fund, I didn't just do it for those children." He looked up from wiping the table. "What do you mean?" "I did it for you too. I wanted to show you what it looks like when money is used to build people up instead of to control them." Kevin set down the dish rag and came over to hug me. It was the first spontaneous hug he'd given me since he was a teenager. "Grandma Dorothy," he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I'm sorry it took me so long to remember what you taught me." "What's that?" "That love isn't something you earn or lose based on your performance. It's something you give and receive freely, without conditions." I held him tight, this young man who'd forgotten himself for a while but had found his way back. "That's the most important lesson anyone can learn," I said. "And you're never too old to learn it." The next morning, I found a note on my kitchen table. Unlike the cruel message from graduation day, this one was written in Kevin's careful handwriting, on paper he'd torn from his engineering notebook. "Grandma Dorothy, thank you for loving me enough to let me fail. Thank you for teaching me that being successful means being someone worthy of love, not someone who's afraid of losing it. Thank you for showing me that the strongest foundations are built with integrity, not ambition. I'm proud to be your grandson. Love always." Kevin, I folded the note carefully and put it in my jewelry box, next to the locket that held pictures of Kevin's parents. Sometimes the most important lessons are the hardest ones to teach, but when they finally take root, they grow into something beautiful that lasts for generations. That afternoon, I started planning the next scholarship ceremony. There were more children out there who needed to know that love doesn't come with conditions, and that the people who raise us with sacrifice and dedication are never something to be ashamed of. They're something to be proud of. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they give us one last lesson that changes everything.